there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. Welcome back. Well, it actually feels welcome back to me, but I think it's only been 2 weeks since I have put out an episode. But that last episode I put out, I recorded quite a bit before, so it feels like a long time for me. But it is the normal release schedule for Charting Toward Intimacy. However, I actually have a few announcements. I did mention that at the end of the last episode that we would start the new year off with a few announcements. So first off, that schedule for putting out episodes is going to change. So I'm actually going to be doing episodes every week. So 1 week will be a shorter 10 to 15 minute episode with just myself, and I'm going to be getting really specific, giving you tips or going specific on church teachings on things. And then the week following that will be the normal format that you've seen for Charting Toward Intimacy episodes. So it's going to be a conversation with someone on a topic. That's going to be a little bit longer format, more like those 30 to 45 minute episodes that you've been seeing. So I'm trying this out. Please let me know what you think. Do you like the shorter episodes? Do you want more of the conversations? Do you have specific topics you want me to cover and research for you? Please reach out. Links are in the show notes, as always. The second announcement that I have before we get started is that I have started a Patreon account. So you can find me patreon.com/charting. And this is a way for you to support me and my work with Charting Toward Intimacy and extending my work out to other areas. There are a couple different tiers to get rewards. Some of those are going to be a monthly Zoom chat with all my patrons, access to a private podcast that I'm going to be starting called Deep Dive. And we're going to dive into church documents on sexuality, chastity, NFP, and, anything kind of in that range. We're going to be starting with Humana Vitae, and that's going to be starting in February. So if you have never heard of Patreon, it's a site where you can support the work I'm doing by signing up for a monthly pledge. So this idea of individuals supporting creators goes back all the way to the early church. Individuals supported people like Michelangelo to paint and sculpt, and architects to build beautiful churches. And while I'm not about to paint for you or build a pretty church or do anything musically, I am working really hard to create great content for you. And I would be so appreciative of your patronage so that I can continue this amazing work. Okay. And with that, let's jump into this week's episode. So you have just me today. It's one of those 10 to 15 minute episodes. And we're going to be talking about changing methods. It's kind of a new year. So I thought starting in the new year, talking about change kind of fits well. And I was actually inspired to do this episode when I saw a post from a friend about learning a new method in the new year. And I just thought, what a great time to reflect on how your method is serving you. And first off, we often get stuck in a method because that's what was available to us at the time we were learning. Maybe we were learning in marriage prep and our parish or our diocese only had one instructor. And so we learned that method, and that's all we've known. There are so many more options now. First off, depending on when you learned, possibly new methods have been researched more, or other methods are more prevalent. There are also a lot more resources and websites that spell out the different methods. So take some time to learn about those different methods. I'm going to put a couple links in the show notes for those kind of resources and websites. And second, thanks to the age of Zoom that we've all been living in this past year, so many more teachers are welcoming clients outside of their area for instruction, myself included, because we're also well-versed in Zoom or other video conferencing apps. I'm not trying to promote Zoom here. But we can't even teach in person anyway. So we might as well teach anybody in the world. So really, the doors are totally wide open, and I seriously invite you to walk through them. So here's what I want to suggest you do this week. I'm going to list off some questions, and I want you to ask yourself these questions about your method and see how your current method is serving you. Now, I'm not saying you have to switch. If you are loving your method, awesome. I am so grateful that you are loving your method, but not everybody is. So take some time to ask yourself these questions. And I'm going to put all these questions in the show notes too. So don't feel like you need to scribble them down or anything. Okay, so first off, how do I feel overall about NFP? Am I empowered? Am I angry, overwhelmed, too busy to do it well? So fertility awareness is an empowering tool to help us learn more about our bodies and plan our families in conjunction with prayer and discernment. That's what NFP is, fertility awareness plus prayer and discernment. So if you are feeling angry, if you're feeling overwhelmed or some other negative emotion, take a step back and try to find the root of that negative emotion. If it stems from using the wrong method at the wrong time of your life, or using a method that doesn't fit your personality, lifestyle, cycle, whatever, then get yourself to researching some other methods. All right, the next question. Do I feel confident in charting my signs? This could mean a couple of things. First off, if you are not confident because you don't feel like you have a handle on it, reach out to your instructor first. If you don't feel confident in the method, check to see if it is a lack of trust somewhere. A lack of trust in yourself, reading signs, a lack of trust in the rules of the method, or maybe a lack of trust in God. So find the source of that lack of trust. And if you need to work through the litany of trust, I highly suggest that. But also talk to your instructor, talk to your priest, talk to your spouse, or talk to a friend who uses the same method as you. However, sometimes that lack of confidence can come because you are the type who wants a lot of cross-check signs, but you're using a method that only uses one or two signs. Or maybe you aren't confident in your ability to interpret signs and you want technology to back you up and help you determine peak. Maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you don't trust technology. Maybe you are the person who likes to really dig down into something like the mucus sign, and your method only charts 2 categories for that, but you want to be more specific. If any of those are the case, take some time to look into a different method. Lots of instructors do low cost or sometimes free intro sessions or like a 15-minute consultation. Take advantage of that. Get all your questions written down on a notepad. Be ready to ask them. Instructors want to help you, and you should feel confident in your NFP method. All right, next question. Am I understanding the rules to my method? Does it feel like there are too many rules, too few? Every method is different. Do the rules make sense to you, and are you confident in them? If yes, keep your method. If your answer is sometimes or no, talk to your instructor or start researching some different methods. Like I said before, lots of instructors have low cost or free consultations. Take advantage of that. Next question. Am I understanding how to interpret the biomarkers I am charting? Always reach out to your instructor first, but don't be afraid to look into a new method if interpretation is difficult. For example, some methods have only 2 categories for mucus and others have multiple traits that you can chart for mucus to categorize it. One or the other could be causing difficulty and confusion with you. And that's just an example. There are lots of different methods, and I definitely don't know everything about all of the different methods. All right, next question. And this is a difficult question to come across. And I want you to hear me out before you turn the podcast off and get mad at me. Have I had an unintended pregnancy? Yes, children are always a blessing, and I will stand by that every single day. But if you are harboring resentment for NFP as a whole because you were using a method that wasn't right for you at the time, then it is time to look into a new method and see if there's something that fits better. Next question. Have I recently gone through or are going through a change like pregnancy, childbirth, acute stress, perimenopause, etc.? And do I feel like my method is serving me well through this change? A classic issue that comes up is some methods are better suited for postpartum in certain women. So keep in mind, this is all about you. If your method is serving you well, that's great. If it's not, start looking into a new method. Next question. Do I have very few available days during my cycle? I'm not saying that changing method will always change this. But if you recently or gradually started getting fewer and fewer available days, reach out to your instructor first and make sure you have a good handle on your method. However, you might have recently gone through, one of the changes I mentioned just before. And, for example, like postpartum, it might feel impossible to interpret the mucus sign, and you want a method that has technology to back you up. I don't know what your situation is, but a different method might help. And the last question that I have is, do I feel overwhelmed with charting? Some methods chart less signs or only have one check per day. If you're feeling overwhelmed by charting multiple signs, look into a method that charts fewer. All right, so let me take a step back after, wow, that was a doozy of questions. I'm not trying to convince you to switch methods. If your method is working, that's awesome. What I really want to convey is that you are not stuck in the method you learned just because that's what you learned. There are multiple different types of methods because everyone is different. We are all beautifully, wonderfully made in God's image, and that image is multifaceted. If we were all supposed to use the same method, God probably would have just created one sign to measure our hormonal fluctuations, but he didn't. There are a bunch of different biomarkers across different methods that have been well researched. Things like mucus, basal body temperature, LH levels in urine, vaginal sensation, electrolyte levels. I also read that there's something about saliva. I don't even know what that is. And there's probably tons more that either haven't been discovered or haven't been fully researched. I mean, honestly, femtech is so cool. I also want to point out a really important part. If NFP were easy, everyone would do it. Learning a fertility awareness-based method takes time and effort. So when you're answering those questions that I had above, if it's just because it's hard, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to change methods. But learning fertility awareness, it takes that time and effort. And once you've learned it, there's still going to be bumps along the road. So just because NFP and the teaching behind it are hard, doesn't mean it's time to switch. If you're struggling with the teachings, that's actually for an entire other episode. Coming soon. I'm going to be going through some of the best church documents and catechism points on the teachings of NFP within a marriage. But what I'm really getting here on this episode is that your method should serve you and your lifestyle. Maybe, for example, when you were newly married, getting up at the same time and taking your temperature worked perfect for your lifestyle. But now you have 3 under 5 and only one of them sleeps through the night. That basal body temperature sign might not be helpful. And actually, you might not be able to fulfill the rules of your method because you're not able to get an accurate basal body temperature. And in that case, you would have fewer available days. For another example, maybe you had really regular cycles, but they're recently looking different. And you want to switch to a method with a medical component that can interpret your chart and intervene medically if needed. Maybe you were more casually avoiding pregnancy for a while, and you now have an incredibly dire reason to avoid and need a method with the highest efficacy rate or lots of cross-checked signs to confirm. All right, the next thing I want to jump into, and this is so important to me because I have personally struggled with this. If money is a reason that you haven't switched to a method that would fit you better, please know that I am so sorry that you are in this position. As I mentioned in a previous episode, finances are the primary reason I didn't learn NFP to start with. This is a space I am incredibly passionate about, and I want to make a change for the better. If something as important as NFP is not accessible to everyone, then the church has a problem. But I also want you to understand that your health, sanity, and marriage are all worth the investment in a method that is right for you. A lot of instructors offer payment plans if the cost up front would be too hard, but would be doable over the course of a few months. Additionally, for methods like Marquette that have a large upfront cost of a monitor, there's Facebook groups that cater to these methods and have members selling used monitors. And you could look at like Facebook Marketplace for things like that. Maybe you want to switch from a method that has something like a monitor. You can sell it and pay for your new instruction. Most of all, I want you to not be afraid to let something as important as NFP take up space in your budget. I honestly think that if someone had told me that, I probably would have felt better about paying for a class. So I'm just going to say it again. Do not be afraid to let something as important as NFP take up space in your budget. All right, so make it a goal for yourself this month. If your answers to any of those questions made you think maybe it's time to check out a new method, then get on it. I'm going to put some links in the show notes to read up on some of the popular methods that are out there from some of my favorite people in the NFP fertility awareness space. So do yourself a favor this year and check out what else is out there if you haven't already. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to just remind you also about the announcements that I gave at the beginning of the episode. There are now going to be episodes every week. Yay! I'm so excited to be dedicating more time to charting toward intimacy. And I also want to sincerely ask you to join my Patreon community at patreon.com/charting. I have some fun stuff that will only be available to my patrons, so check it out and please support this ministry. As always, reach out to me on Instagram or email if you have questions or comments. Links to all of that are in the show notes. Until next time.